Hey everyone, welcome back to Casual Watch Reviews. This week we're going to be looking at the brand new Seiko Speedtimer, but I thought we'd mix it up for this review. I'm actually going to do a collaboration review. Seiko released two watches. One was a mechanical chronograph, and then these ones which are solar quartz watches, and these are loosely based on a 1969 Prospex Speedtimer. And I say loosely because honestly, they don't really bear that much of a visual resemblance to those vintage watches. What's vintage about them? They're slightly smaller cases at 39mm, a thickness of 13.3mm, and a slightly shorter lug-to-lug measurement of 45.5mm. Vintage, yet still contemporary size. The watches are using the Seiko V192 caliber. This is a solar-powered chronograph movement, accurate to around plus minus 15 seconds per month. Seiko don't directly say this is a mecha quartz movement, but the second hand when actioning the chronograph, there's 5 pulses between each second. We've gone through the specifications of the watch now. TJ, I'll ask you, why did you specifically like this watch? And then I'll go into why I bought it.
Yeah, so I've been looking for a while for something that can be like my Speedmaster, but day to day. I'm about to transition to the business world, the real, post-Navy career, suit and tie or business casual environment. And I have a feeling that the tactical black watches aren't going to be at home. I just want something grab and go to work with in the future. And so I've been looking for a chronograph that's like that for a long time. So when this one jumped out, it just made total sense for me. And I do like that even though the historical connection is a bit loose, it's there. I remember that in Whidbey Island, where I did most of my flying, we have a display case for prisoners of war that returned home that flew A6s. That's where they were based in Vietnam. And there's a Seiko Speedtimer in that display case that belonged to one of the aviators that was shot down. It doesn't look like that, but just the fact that it's kind of a continuation of that line to me was kind of special too. So I basically found what I was looking for. This is a practical, very user-friendly, convenient interpretation of what my Speedmaster otherwise does for me. So that's what I was looking for, and I found it.
Awesome. Yeah, I was captivated by the design, and they seem to have gone all out with this quartz version. Now, it is more expensive, I would say, than other quartz chronographs, say from Citizen, etc. When you see it, the fit and finish, the polishing, the brushing on there, it does visually separate itself from the competition. I think certainly on my blue one, the blue really plays with the light. It can go from a very dark, almost black looking color to navy blue to purple hue. They've got 100-meter water resistance, and they're using Lume Bright. So here is a Lume shot of what the watch looks like. The Lume isn't as bright as, say, one of the Seiko divers, is it, TJ, you would say?
I like two things about the Lume. They use the 4-corner style, like the old IWC Mark 11. I love that. It lasts throughout the night. You're right. It's not, I realize that a chronograph is just not going to be a diver or a tritium tube watch, but for Lume paint and for how small the Lume surfaces are, I'm super impressed. I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I can tell the time. I'm very impressed with the Lume on this.
Well, if you're thinking of buying this watch, what I thought we'd go through is things we like about the Speedtimer, and then things that perhaps we could have been improved, just to give you a whole round view of it. TJ, do you want to kick it off with one of the things that you really like about the new Speedtimer?
Absolutely. I'll start with the aesthetic of it, because if that wasn't there, I wouldn't have bought it. It's like the Speedmaster for me, that it combines tool watch, but also it looks elegant. And so it's not out of place with a suit. It looks like it has a purpose rather than just being dressy. Part sporty, part dressy. It looks like it could be in a cockpit. It looks like it could be in a boardroom. So to me, the aesthetic and just every detail of the design, it just pops. I wish I'd gotten the white one as well, because that one, more than any of them, I think is the most beautiful. But I'm a black dial guy, and I had to go with that. Aesthetically, this is fantastic.
I definitely had this on my list as well. The dial and the execution of the dial and the indices almost have a mirror-like finish, really capture the light. There's a domed sapphire crystal, which I think is unusual to put on a Seiko chronograph. Certainly on the lower end ones, they have the hard Lex crystal. What I think is interesting is, because it's solar powered, I think the solar cells are contained within the chronograph subdials.
Yeah, you can see that they have a different reflective quality than the rest of the dial.
when you see a close-up, the cell is not a complete circle. There's a slice
That's
down the
right.
side of it, and I suspect that that is one of the connections for the solar cell.
You really have to look, so it's not a disruptive thing.
TJ, what did you have next on your list for positives?
Well, for me, it's the size. I've been so disappointed. I have a 6.5-inch wrist. So for me, seeing 42s come out with 22 millimeter lug width has been the greatest disappointment. And Seiko has, if it's a chronograph, Seiko's going to make it big. At 39 millimeters, for me, this wears perfectly. In fact, I think it made me realize I could probably handle 38 just fine. It's awesome. And 20 millimeter lug width is so versatile. I love it. I'm so glad they didn't go big. I love the size.
Next on my list, and this is the watch itself and also the bracelet, is how solid it feels. When the watch is on its bracelet, the whole thing feels very solid. The bracelet makes both my plus and minus list, but the plus of it is that it makes the overall watch feel incredibly solid. The actions on the button, when you hold it into your hand, it's a very solid feeling watch. And even though it is quartz, it still has a little bit of weight to it. Not meaning that it's heavy, just has that nice bit of weight to it that I think sometimes is quite difficult to get with quartz watches.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was quite surprised how heavy it was and how solid it is.
What did you have next on your list?
This one's me kind of admitting I was wrong a little bit. So I've railed against Mecha Quartz for a long time, and I still stand behind my complaints about the certain aspects of Mecha Quartz, like the 60-minute dial. I underestimated the value that people put on the sweep looking like a mechanical watch. That sweep is beautiful, and it really caught me. Now I'm starting to understand why so many micro brands compromise the legibility of the subdials to give that sweep.
I'm still will never understand the 24-hour subdial. TJ, did you change your mind on it?
No, I didn't change my mind. And we'll get to it in the negative side. Now, I do understand that it has some tiny little bit of utility. When I was in Afghanistan, we set our watches to GMT times. Even though the base was running on local, our flight schedule, everything was set to UTC so that when you flew, you're already in that mode. You're only 4 hours and a half difference there in Afghanistan. But if you were in the British military and you were deployed to Singapore across the world, it would get confusing if you had to set your watch to back home UTC time. I guess it could be helpful to if you're one of those folks that needed to do that you would not make a mistake between morning and evening.
That utility that you mentioned that might have a military utility, this watch isn't a military-inspired watch, is it? It's more of a racing watch with the tachymeter on there. That's one of the other things that I really like is the tachymeter bezel on here. I had my fingers crossed that it was going to be ceramic. I don't think it is ceramic. I think it's many layers of black paint over a stainless steel bezel. It certainly has the sheen of ceramic. In reality, I don't think it has. Let us know in the comment section if you know better than that.
I think just some of the normal stats are great. Water resistance is great. The fact that it's solar, you covered that. But I think it's the strap monster. And I think that's worthwhile because I started swapping out straps right away and was really happy with how it looks.
I totally agree with you. I've had it on multiple different straps, on a bun strap. I've had it on FKM rubber straps. I'm currently wearing it on an Uncle Seiko razor wire bracelet. Love this bracelet. It might look a little bit weird when I'm showing these photos of it and how it connects and how the bracelet looks if you're not familiar with how these Uncle Seiko bracelets look, but they're incredibly flexible, incredibly comfortable. I think it suits it. Even though the watch bracelet it comes with has the integrated lugs with it, I think you can pull off a metal bracelet that doesn't have integrated lugs with it because that's how a lot of vintage watches were that had metal bracelets with them. It makes it look a little bit more vintage.
The bottom of the case is flat. I found straight edged metal. It just looks right in there. I think there's a picture there that you can show.
Okay, so we've gone through some of the reasons about why we personally decided to buy this watch, but we've certainly got some things that maybe little niggles, maybe little improvements that could be made. TJ, why don't you kick this section off then?
Okay, so this won't be any surprise for anyone that's heard my commentary, but a 60-minute chronograph is hard to read as opposed to 30. I think that's why in the old days you saw so many 30s. They did a good job making the 60-minute counter as legible as they could, but if they'd made it a little bigger to match the size of the other two, it would have helped. It's just tough, just based on the size. When the hour-minute hands sort of cross over, you're going to lose a little bit of access to your elapsed minutes. I'm 46. With reading glasses, I'm good to go, but without them, it's a little bit of a strain. If I was a 25-year-old aviator, I'd have no trouble with that. I think that the standard was 30-minute elapsed just like on a Speedmaster for a reason. And I think they're just making it unnecessarily difficult to read it. Workable, but difficult.
One of the things I had on my list, I think this is one of your positives, but I wouldn't have minded too much if it was maybe a millimeter, 2 millimeters bigger.
No, okay, no, I hear you.
I've got a 7.2-inch wrist, and I wouldn't have minded if it was slightly bigger. It might have thrown the overall proportions off, so I'm willing to say that.
Can you show it just up to the camera, just wrist roll it there? Yeah, see, I think our minds are just miscalibrated from the large watch trend. And
You might be right.
I'm looking forward to seeing what happens when we sort of right size a little bit. The pendulum is swinging, but hopefully it settles into some sweet spot.
What did you have next on your list?
We debated forever because on the announcement, they said that the GMT hand was going to be adjustable. And that was going to make this thing amazing to be able to independently set it so that you can use it as an aviator for UTC time or second time zone. Boy, that would have been special and would have missed opportunity. And I don't understand why they had to tease it as if it was going to be a great thing and then it turned out not to be. It would have just been better if they said, hey, this is going to continue our trend of ignoring our biggest fans and not making this feature adjustable. I guess more disappointing that they kind of led us to believe that it would be fixed.
One of my improvements, I've complimented the bracelet. I know there's a lot of chatter back and forth on a lot of the forums about how the bracelet doesn't really suit the watch. I think it looks fine on there. The fitted end links are fitted to the watch, but they're not fitted to the case. There's definitely a height difference. The end links aren't flush with the watch. They've got that ridge there. I actually don't mind that look because a lot of vintage watches had weird bracelets with them. What I don't like so much about the bracelet is the clasp. The clasp has only got 2 layers of micro adjustment on it. And if you have it on the furthest back micro adjustment, it doesn't almost sit flush on the clasp. I'm not sure. The clasp certainly looks more vintage because it's smaller, but I ended up only putting the bracelet on briefly.
I also took it off. Right now, Admiralty Gray looks fantastic on it.
What next did you have on your list, TJ?
So I've got one more, and this is really, it's just a matter of personal taste, right? But I actually thought it was just a little bit too blingy. It's still gorgeous, but I could have done without the mirrored hour markers. Again, my reference to this is the Speedmaster, so I would have been happy with those being printed white. The bezel has 2 angles, one flat and one about 45 degrees. The outer edge is very shiny. That should have been flat or matte. Would have been a little bit better. So that's all taste because the watch is gorgeous, but I find that it's really reflective. When I photograph it, I prefer the images where it's not so shiny. I think that a little bit less bling would have done it right. But I also know that the sparkle and the shine of it is probably what makes it look elegant.
It's interesting that you say that because I quite like those mirror finished on the indices, personal preference, but they are definitely blingy. I don't know whether because your black dial version, it might enhance it even more. Certainly on my blue dial, there's that variation of color because the blue dial, because it changes in the light, maybe the indices don't look as blingy. Last on my list, and I know this is nitpicky, I wish that the crown had been screw down. I know this is controversial because then the chronograph pushers aren't screw down either.
Well, this Quartz has a screw down and it's a chronograph. So, I mean, I think that's a good layer of protection to have. The pushers are only an issue if you actuate them underwater, so that wouldn't be, I wouldn't do that. I like the fact that this one has a screw down crown. You're right. I think it's a missed opportunity.
Well, then that brings us to the summary of this review and the most important question. Do you think it's worth the money?
I do. I've been looking at Quartz chronographs for a very long time to find a really great one. Would a price around the $500 or $400 be more fair for what you're getting? It's possibly. But when you realize what's out there and what this provides, it's clearly head and shoulders above other watches that are cheaper. And I mean, I think it's awesome. So it's okay to spend a little bit more. And they put more into this. Not every Seiko has sapphire, solar. We not have to worry about the battery, good water resistance. I mean, it just has a lot. And so for me, I'd say it's a hit and it's worth it.
I often comment on the podcast about how I think sometimes Seiko's pricing is all over the place. I think some of their new mechanical watches are overpriced for what you're actually getting, but I think this is bang on the money. But anyway, guys, more importantly, let us know what you think in the comments section down below. If you've got any questions, let us know. Appreciate you watching. I'll see you next time on Casual Watch Reviews. Thanks, guys. Bye.